So reciprocity to me is mutual understanding, and fair is not always equal. So both those things are true to me at the same time. That do we understand? Do we have a mutual understanding? Can we agree on this point and this point, or this facet and this facet, even if we can't agree on the whole disco ball? So what elements of what's happening here are you lit up by? Are you struck by? Are important to you? What are you hearing me say? What am I hearing you say? This is reciprocity to me. Are we having a mutually beneficial connection, not just conversation, but connection?
Welcome to the Earth Mates podcast. Together, we explore how to find your path from climate anxiety to community action by asking, who are you? Because just like any relationship, that matters. So get ready to be raw and real, but also playful and silly with me, Chief Relationship Officer Amber Peoples, as we discover what's possible through the lens of the 5 Earth Archetypes. Curiosity and subscription buttons highly encouraged. Welcome, my friend. Today, as we record this session, we are in this liminal place of winding our way towards springtime here in the Northern Hemisphere. For those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, of course, you are starting to get warm and cozy in your sweaters as winter is arriving. And then as you're listening to this, who knows what time of year it is? It could be absolutely any time. That's the joy of the podcast world, is that when the time is right for you to listen to this, you will be listening to this. But at the beginning of every show, we like to tune in with what that is. What is that moment that's around you? What is nature's story in that moment that you are a part of as being part of nature? And in this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different, where I'm going to ask you to tune in a little bit more specifically to a part of your body. And that part of your body is your hands. And just kind of rubbing them together, whether it is springtime and the mornings are cold and the afternoons, you don't know if it's rainy or sunny yet, and maybe your fingertips need a little bit of warmth, or maybe it's heading into winter and you're feeling that. Or maybe it just feels really good no matter what time of year to notice how alive that feels, and that energy and that heat that builds up right in your hands. And knowing that that's the same energy that exists all over this planet of friction and energy that heats up when we bring two dynamic forces together. And I'm just going to pause for a moment and silently count to 5 inside my head while you allow yourself this moment to fully commit to that sensation. Thank you. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you to our Weaver Earth Archetype, Tressa Yonekawa Bundren. I honestly don't remember when or how we met. Was it dance, an event, through your partner? We definitely lived in the same town for many years, and we definitely had heart-to-heart talks, because that's what we do. And as her Medio bio promises, Tressa will disrupt your life in the best ways. So about 2 years ago, Tressa posted an opportunity to join her at an event in Puerto Rico, and I was ready to say yes. Since then, we continue to support and grow together in manifesting our wild and wonderful dreams, finding language for our innermost desires, and feeling rooted to the earth. So I'm excited to have another heart-to-heart conversation today while you all listen in. And now, without further ado, welcome, Tressa. I am so curious to hear what your version of that story is.
Amber, thank you so much. My version of that story, first of all, I want to say thank you for that intro with the rubbing our hands together and getting really present, because I need that. And I think so many of us forget how important it is to just get really here before taking on anything. And it makes everything better and more connected and more juicy and more powerful, and therefore hopefully more successful. So thank you for that. And my version of our meeting is that I don't remember either. Ethereal magic has just brought us together, and when certain things come up, like finding words for things and creating larger things that impact the earth in beautiful ways, I always think of you. So the invitation to join me in Puerto Rico, where I was speaking, was part of this is a dynamic event full of really incredible human beings who are intent on changing the planet in better ways, changing their lives in the world, and ourselves in better ways. And you were the first person who came to mind.
How lovely. Yeah. It's in these moments of how do we continue to evolve? How do we continue to emerge that we think of one another? And I think that's a huge part of this podcast is having people reflect on what are those relationships in our lives. Science is proving, behavior science is proving that in any kind of more altruistic thing or worldwide thing, not directly self-interest related thing, that the biggest needle mover, it could be voting, it could be climate change action, it could be a whole host of things. The biggest thing is, what do your friends expect you to do?
That's such an interesting point. There's this piece to all of us that I'm connected with right now that is ever evolving. I don't know very many people who have done the same thing in the same way for a significant amount of time. I think that as we evolve, we continue to change. We are daring enough to be out here in the progress of change, and that's a very vulnerable place to be. But I think that so many of us are really engaged in not being stagnant, not being stuck, and understanding that evolution occurs first internally, even if we're joining something external that is evolving, that the true change comes from self-aware integration, interaction, connection, togetherness. So one of the things I love about you is that I never know what to expect from you next.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. That reminds me of I was hanging out just enjoying a festival this summer, and a friend who's known me for probably as long as you have, she wanted to take a picture of me, and she's like, "Will you stop changing for like 2 seconds so I can get a picture?" So I absolutely love that, and I love that is in your very nature and your calling in this world to encourage people to do that. In fact, what is such an interesting thing is that you claim that the question you wake up with every day, that you pursue every day, that you wonder as you go to sleep every night is, what changes in the world when we learn to connect without fear of ourselves or projection of our stories on each other? And how do we get there right now? And so it's so beautiful to hear that, in that it is this welcoming, it is this embracing, it is this encouragement of change. And I'd love for you to say more about that.
Well, it's important to me because I didn't always do it. And I think that's, so much of may we always teach what we know and continue to learn. So I, got the degrees, went to university and did the things that I thought I was supposed to do. And they've been helpful. I'm not going to say that I regret that at all, but I did it so that I would have the letters behind my name to indicate that I knew what I was doing. So so many of the things that I did when I was younger, I'm going to say in air quotes, were in order to prove that I was worthy or that I knew or that I could handle. And so much of that was just complete fluff. Could I have learned what I learned without going to university? Absolutely. And the degrees have certainly helped me on the way. So have the what I call day cover jobs. And I did several corporate day cover jobs where I would be the person that managed the things and helped grow the things. And my soul was dying. I didn't know why, because I was accomplishing everything that the world told me I was supposed to accomplish to be successful. I had the right car. I threw the parties. I wore the right boots, and I at one point stopped and said, this is not, going back and forth to the dry cleaners or having things delivered is not making me happy. What makes me happy is being in service to self-aware presence and connection that I was learning literally as a child in the mountains of Montana, from nature. And so when I started to read text from all over the world and recognize that the things that I had learned in nature were very resonant with the things I was learning in significant texts from all over our planet for thousands of years. It really impressed on me that we come in with a lot of the answers. We just need to have the right stimulus to remember, to recall, and to continue to learn so that we don't ever get stuck.
Yeah, I think that word stuck is such a critical thing that so many people in modern developed countries feel a lot of times, is this feeling of being stuck, and in particular around climate change. There is one of the things that I feel like is my mission to help people with is when they get into this emoji shrug character and they go, but what can I do? And it's a stuck question. It's a relatively defeatist question. It is a cop-out question. There's a lot of layers of complication to it. There's no blame there whatsoever, but it is giving it an honest look at what it is that's happening, and that feeling of stuck, and how do we unstick from that when it feels daunting, when it feels scary. And when you're working with people, you're working oftentimes with them in some form of relationship. That could be a work relationship, that could be a personal relationship. In those first beginning phases, when people are feeling they're so immersed in the feeling of being stuck. That's why they have accepted that there's a problem and they need some kind of help, and they seek that help. But I'm wondering, how do you start with people in that moment?
Yeah, that in that moment, I ask, what makes you happy?
Hmm.
And surprisingly, many people can't answer that at that point. But it gives us a place to jump off from. And when we talk about getting stuck with climate, my daughters and I, when they were younger, we decided that for a year we wouldn't purchase anything wrapped in plastic, that just no plastic at all. And it grossly limited what we could buy. It was grossly limited what we could buy, and we got used to it and it was fine. And so close to the end of the year, we're congratulating each other and ourselves, thinking, oh, look, we did this great thing for the planet by not buying anything in plastic. And we drove by a building. We were living in Portland, Oregon for about a decade. We drove by a building that was just going up, that was completely wrapped in thick plastic. And we went, oh, so so what really were we doing? What statement were we making? And so I definitely can feel that frustration, agitation, and stuckness with how do we move forward with the planet, in our lives, with our relationships, in work, all of those things. So the place to begin is with self-awareness about what's important to me. What is success? What is love? What is, how am I built? What is my calling, purpose? Those are kind of flimsy terms to me. What is true? What are my truths? And truth is a totally subjective construct of our brains. But when we move that into our whole being, what is my truth? What are my truths? And when we can start there, we can move into happiness, because a lot of us don't even know how to describe our own happiness. What is happiness to me? If we take a moment and just reflect on that, do we have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think that is such an important question. And so in that journey that you take people on, and this is one of the things that I love about the Weaver type, is this place of ambiguity. It's a very tangible place, specifically for the Weaver type. For those in other types, it can feel different, and it can feel oftentimes, it can have challenging associations with it, of especially if you're on the side that is more, that likes things precise and likes things concretized. Then ambiguity can be something that, like, it's your mission to make sure none of that exists and that it's all clarified. And on the side that's more about embodiment and sensations, they are still trying to refine that ambiguity in a certain way, whether it's twirling like Sufis do, or poetry like Rumi did. There's a refinement of it. And with the Weaver type, there's this almost wholehearted embrace of this place of ambiguity, because it's known to be this place that helps you get from where you are to where you want to be. And so tell me more about your relationship with ambiguity and how you can hold that space for other people when they are working through it and their own challenges that come up in that space.
I love this question because I'd never really thought of it in that way, with those semantics. So thank you for that. I'm going to use that in the future. This place of ambiguity is a place where, in corporate industrial work, I use the term curiosity. So can we get curious about what hasn't been achieved, what's possible, what we're willing to do, what we're not willing to do? Can we get curious about why we're willing and not willing to do those things? Can we get curious about how those things could possibly happen, or how in our reality they've already happened and now we can deconstruct in order to construct? So this place of ambiguity is all openness, all possibility, all potential. How exciting is that? And now where do we take it in the concretized, as you said, terms, in a way that makes sense to how we interpret success and what we want our outcomes to be? So what is true now? What do you want to be true as we're working together and when we're done working together? And now let's get curious about how that's going to happen, because it's going to happen. And can we outfit ourselves from the beginning and remind ourselves through the journey of any relationship, of any communication, when I'm doing mediation with people, especially people who are very angry with each other or very frustrated, or things have built up over time, can we get curious here, not only about why we ended up here, because that's the story that we can tell on the psychology couch for the next 10 years if we want to, but can we get curious about why we got here in such a way that it helps us propel and improve how we do better together moving forward? So if that means that we're going to come to a more elegant exit, or if that means we're going to flourish and anoint this joining, this togetherness, whatever that is, whether it's corporate culture or partnerships, or we're going public with our company, or this is our marriage or our family or whatever, the same rules and tools apply to excellent leadership as they do to excellent lovers, excellent partnering, excellent parenting. And I think that's a phenomenon of this getting curious and being able to move in the spaces of ambiguity without necessarily needing all the foot and handholds, because that's how we get stuck. We get in the patterns of feeling safe because we're patterned in the comfort of the continuation of something, not necessarily that we are moving through ambiguity with curiosity so that we can do it better together.
Well, I love that element of curiosity. It is when I have my copywriting brain on, that is the ultimate lever that I want to push. So it's like this little hook, and you get people to like come along with this promise of something. And I love that you put it also in the context of relationship, that there is both the internal aspect of that and the owning of whatever that truth is, and owning the ambiguity until like you're able to find those touch points. And so turning to nature again as the in my opinion, the ultimate relationship. It is the air we breathe. It is the food that we eat. It is the water that we drink. It is literally the gravitational pull that allows us to stand. As a relationship, what do you think we can do to be more curious in a relationship that has become pretty distant? A relationship that people joke about how uncomfortable they would be if they had to be closer to it. Relationship that we've somehow created this weird hierarchy where we're at the top of it, but yet not even part of it at the same time. And so I'm curious where you see the work that you do interacting with that relationship.
Yeah, I see that the work that I do, foundationally, I believe that all of us have three different callings ultimately, foundationally. One is to help other people, one is to help animals, one is to help the planet. And it can be a combination of those or one of those. But ultimately, we are driven by one of those motivators. So it's rare and I think dysfunctional when we're motivated to help only ourselves. I think that the purpose behind the work that I do ultimately, if we're going to talk about it in granular terms, is the truth of us is this benevolence, this love beyond love, if you want to use that terminology, but this ability to use our power, use our intelligence, use our skills to be purposeful. And one of the things that I have found working in geriatrics and in hospice care is that when we lose our purpose, when our purpose is taken away, when we age out of our purpose, we have such little ground. So if our purpose can be reattenuated to the self-awareness in connection with all that is, in order to make better something within our control and also so far beyond our grasp. So it's the concept of, if I plant a tree today and I never see the shade of the tree, but somebody 20 years from now does, that's a win. And can we embrace that with self-awareness so that the purpose is not that we fill our pockets with as many coins as we can today, but that we are in a more benevolent, curious way, able to have success while also contributing to the success of others, to the planet? Are we treating each other better so that we're not trying to scrape everything off of this earth so that we can profit from it? Can we then, if we have better relationships within ourselves and where our self-worth is healed and healing, and we're not needing to grasp at things, and we're not so impacted by marketing psychology that says you're nothing if you don't have this thing. Oh, now this thing, and now this thing. And if you don't dress this way, or, those kinds of things that make us all crazy and that so many of us chase with good reason. We've been so entrained there. But what if we can become more self-aware, empowered, present, benevolent, that we aren't groping to get ahead of each other in such a way that it harms us and other people and the world we live in? Then what? I mean, I've often said, and I have believed since I was a kid, and I check in with this all the time, if there is something evil here, it is fear. Because look at what we do to ourselves and each other from fear. Fear of being seen as dumb or not able or whatever. Fear of not having, all the fears that make us harm ourselves and harm each other and disregard the planet that supports us.
I come back to a phrase that I think is foundational to the work I do. It's foundational to the moment I had where I'm like, wow, I can't have just heard what I just heard and look any other direction but this direction. And it started with the phrase, Earth is our home. And it wasn't, I didn't even yet know that the eco, that prefix to words, when you go back to the Greek where it came from, actually means home. So ecology is the study of home. Economy is the management of home. Is this powerful place of this point that you're talking about of I'm curious because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost sounds like the word belonging is what comes to mind. And I'm wondering if that fits in with this cosmos you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely. Belonging is a huge part of it. And one of the main complaints that I hear, especially in couples, also in corporate culture, is um, I, I I got into this to belong, to be connected, and I don't feel belonging. I just feel this kind of terminal velocity of having to do certain tasks in order to keep things going. And so this place of belonging, right? This place of belonging is huge. And we join groups to belong. We join partnerships to belong. We join companies to belong. Companies market to us so that we feel like we can belong. We're supposed to know that we can get into a love relationship to belong, for that uh, like amazing connection of total belonging and total approval and total, reception. And then we find out that it's different because we have all these games in our head that we've learned. So what happens when, again, we get curious and we get into this space of ambiguity where maybe we don't have the answers, but what's here, what's available? And then that becomes more playful. We can say, oh, I don't know, but what if we try this? Well, what if we try this? Well, what happens if we do this? How are you feeling if I do this? And then those phrases that come up with like authentic or intentional relationships, which would be, hearing you say that, I notice I. And what I just heard you say was this. Is that true? Is there anything that I need clarification on from you? So when we have this new, very old way of interrelating, we have more belonging because we have more understanding of each other, because we're seen. We know that we're being seen because we have the reflection of being seen. We're not just talking heads, which is why when I do keynotes, I create an experience. I have people stand up and actually interact and lead them through prompts, which make sure that they have an experience of belonging, of not belonging, of belonging again, of how to power, of disempowerment, of power again, of benevolence, of a lack of benevolence again, so that we can see and compare and contrast what's true for us. And typically what I will hear after I've done a keynote and I get to meet people is, I have never had an experience like that before. I have never looked at how I relate to myself and other people like that before. And to me, that's surprising because I have had to have those experiences for the last 25 years because of what I've chosen to do and just the circumstances I've been thrown into, which affirm that I'm doing the right work here. And when somebody says, I've never done that before, or my partner and I haven't felt that way about each other since the first 6 weeks that we knew each other, or, whatever that is, we didn't know that was sustainable or could continue to grow or was still there. Those things affirm to me that we're on the right path because we still have the curiosity and we still have the ability to have belonging.
That's beautiful. And it gave me such a powerful aha moment. Because with the Weaver type, of course, when you have a loom, you have strings that are going one way and strings that you are weaving through in the other direction. And you're, with every wave of that string going up and down, you're deciding which color's on top and which one's on the bottom. And something that I know about you as a Weaver type is that you do embody a wide range of either ors. You're in neurocognitive science and intuition. You speak and you listen, you laugh and you cry, your business and pleasure. You have these dichotomies that you know how to hold, like these two different strands of the weave. And the larger that capacity is, and this is the aha, the larger the capacity of the weaver, the more ambiguity, the more curiosity you have space to play with for what the options are of this way that you defined truth earlier.
Yeah, that playfulness is such a necessary part of human existence. We're here in these bodies to experience. And so part of the experience, it's not all supposed to be drudgery and work and 10xing everything. Part of the experience is the playfulness and the intrigue and the interest and the desire and the, what does ice cream feel like when I swallow it? And, how does rain feel if I'm outside, like splashing through puddles rather than avoiding them? And these experiences we tend to deny ourselves in order to feel like we are complicit in societal norms. To say societal norms are necessary, and also which which of those do you want to be complicit with, and because they serve you and because they serve society, and which are self-imposed because of what you've seen and heard from other people who didn't have the tools to grow and evolve in the way that you can.
Yeah, one way that I've heard that when we look at the systemic qualities of climate change and all that's involved in that, and people are in that place of what can I do? One way I've heard it so powerfully expressed is, well, culture is a collection of individual choices that we kind of agree to. And so if you as a person start to make different choices, yes, there is the problem of, holy cow, that entire building is wrapped in plastic, even though I just did this year of plastic free. But then, when you have these moments that you share with more and more people, then it becomes what ultimately is culture. And that's where the change velocity is. And I thought that was such an interesting dichotomy that you had earlier that I know I skipped over because I had this other aha, but it was this difference between belonging and I think you called the velocity of like the to-do list. I was like, whoa, that's a statement. This comfort that we get from cultural norms, which are a blessing. There's no doubt about it. Our human species needs that, where our brain isn't always having to make decisions all of the time, but can rely on certain things and pathways in our brain. But to have this power to be curious and to question them is the. At first I wanted to use the word radical, but it's not even radical. It doesn't have to be that extreme.
Mm-mm.
It just is. Like one of the things that I love is a sentence that you use a lot is simply, I'm here for it. Whatever it is, it's not extreme. I'm just here for it. And so I'm wondering how, when the listener right now just heard that and had their own reaction, but I'm wondering, when you say that to people and you're seeing their instant response, you're seeing their eyes, you're hearing how their breath changes or doesn't, what I think it's such a phenomenal phrase because we don't hear it, but we crave it. And so I'm curious what response you get from people when you are putting that amazingly powerful yet simple sentence out into the world.
The encouragement, to try it on is part of the experience of living and of working with me. So you haven't thought of it this way, well, try it. Just say, I'm showing up for this right now, and see if it fits. And if it doesn't, fine. And if it does, fine. And then let's go on to the next prompt and let's see if that fits. That we are such creatures of not just habit, but of the comfort of the hamster wheel. And so if comfort is derived by going to the same job every day for 50 years and doing the same thing, or slight variations on the same thing, and that's where you choose to be, and that feels good, we need you there, right? So there's nothing wrong with desiring to be doing something same or similar over long periods of time. That is beautiful when that's your choice to be there. And after working with government agencies where the people would say, upon first meeting, and I would ask as a consultant, how do you feel about being here, right now? And almost all of the government employees at that time in that place would say, well, pretty good. Only got 17 years, 4 months, 14 days, 8 hours, and 32 minutes before I retire.
Whew.
Heavy stuff. And then, and that was early in my career. And so that impacted me so much, as well as working at that time with many, many, many couples. The spouse would come in with the primary person who was coming in for services, and these couples had been married for 50 years or more. And so I was going to write the next great novel on how to have love that lasts forever by interviewing all these people that I had access to and saying, how has love lasted? How have you stayed married for over 50 years? What's the secret? And so enthusiastic and curious. And the answer I got 99.99% of the time from the women was, you just learn to put up with a lot. Almost exactly that phrasing every time, over hundreds and hundreds of couples. And from the masculine, from the men, male-bodied people, was almost 100% of the time also, well, I have a shop in the basement, or I have a shop in the garage, or I have a place that I go to get away, to do my thing. And I was shocked. Oh, so this is what partnering is for a long time. You just learn to put up with a lot and you find a place to get away? How is that serving us? And so then, and that was 25 years ago now. So then my quest was really ignited to figure out, where do we go wrong? What's happening that love and that connectedness and that belonging gets so disintegrated and becomes such a chore that we're just putting up with time in order to alleviate us of that tension or boredom or sameness. And it's not that we need to be jumping out of airplanes every Tuesday, or, this Tuesday and next Tuesday something different. But it is that we have to keep checking in with ourselves and each other to recognize where change is happening, where change is desired, so that we're not just, having hot dogs every Tuesday, right? Or veggie dogs every Tuesday. And because that's what we've done, and because our partner, or because somebody said that that's what they liked one time, and so we assumed that that was a forever thing. So this place of, it's very resonant with Be Here Now. It's very resonant with, Eckhart Tolle and different people who have just simplified life and fully living to being fully present. It's a dare, it's a concept, it's an invitation, it's an allowing, it's an offering, and you don't have to take it. You don't have to accept it. But can we get curious about what happens if we do?
Yeah. And what I hear in this, and it's interesting because I rarely use this word, but I'm using it for the second time today, is it almost feels like a bit of a rewilding. That's a term that's used a lot within circles that teach practices like tracking and bow and arrow and things like that, of strategies to be more at the speed of nature. Somebody mentioned to me that the speed of being able to perceive is at top notch, like bicycle speed. To go into the science of it, one of the fascinating things that is being shown is, just like we know that heart variability is really important. Like, we want to be able to get our heart pumping really fast. And then it's a sign of health if, once we stop whatever that activity is, our heart can go back to resting state pretty quickly. If it takes a while, it's actually a sign that our heart needs some support and some health support. And they're seeing the same thing in regards to things like vagal nerve, things around ruminating and worrying, that yes, there is a time and a place to elevate into fight or flight. There is a time where we do want to be concerned. And then once that is gone, can we quickly or how quickly can we reset back to what is truly here, what is truly now?
Right. And if not, then why? And the why, so often, why we can't reset and be very present is often an unmet need, an unfulfilled something, and a learned habit or pattern. It can be so many different things. But when we get to the foundational source of why that's true, of why we can't get really present, typically it is. I mean, some of the things that have come up for some clients in the past 10 years even are a fear of failure. I can't reset because this is my conflict arc. And if I don't go through my conflict arc, I don't really know what's happening. I can't just stop. Like, one of the things that I encourage people to do in conflict is just stop. Just have a sign, do something, stop and just take a few breaths, jump up, turn around and touch the ground if you need to disrupt the pattern of that conflict arc so that you can have choices, so that you can do it differently, because there's nothing that says, nothing that's written that you need to do something and then keep going because now you'd be embarrassed if you stopped, is ultimately what's happening for people. It's embarrassing to stop, so I need to run it through its course, make sure people are still around, make sure that nobody's left me, make sure that, whatever I'm expecting to happen that is my pattern, and it's often negative, has happened so that I know how to recover and readjust and come back to what is true. But without needing to go through that conflict arc, and none of us need to, it's totally potential to not have to have those dramatic arguments at all when we have the tools of conversation and communication and belonging, the tools of connection. So how can we get to this place of not having to have the conflict, not having to harm ourselves and each other in order to come back and have to do the repair, so that we recognize the pattern and it feels comfortable?
And I love that you've kind of brought us to this place of the word pattern, because another term for the Weaver type is designer. This is where, whether it's designing a formula, whether it's designing like an architect or a community organizer, there often tends to be an element of design that becomes paramount within this type and this way of thinking and operating and offering the world. And I'm curious, when you look at this way of being that you're describing, do you feel that there is some kind of design? Because I think a lot of people, that's where they get stuck, is they might be able to hear what you're saying, but then go, but how do I do that?
When I would go in as a consultant and I would get a basic excavation understanding of what was happening, I could see the web. And when you see the web, you see what's lit up and what's not lit up on the web. You see the little packages of lit up, not lit up. You see who on the web is in the right place, not in the right place, maybe needs to be, re-engaged or disengaged, very clearly. And that design then that comes from that is, what do we want this to look like? Do we want all of these, dead or dying packages in the web? Or do we want to make sure that things are in evolution? One of the things that I've found that I've been surprised by is in this work is that creatives often will come to me, or creative teams, because what this work does is re-engage self-awareness and enthusiasm for the integration and the understanding that we're not trying to replicate something that's already out there. We definitely need the muse or the muses, but the design comes from letting go of the pattern. And that can be conflicting information to people who really want the pattern, who really want to follow something, who are rule followers. And I love rule followers. I am one. But when I can get outside of that and say, okay, I'm following the rules. And now what's available? Now what's possible? Then that's when true creativity and things come through our teams and through us that maybe don't exist yet, that maybe we're ahead of. And I think that's something that I've found through my career is, oh, why don't we just call somebody who can do this? And then finding out from my teams that it's not happening anywhere. Nobody's doing that. Okay, well, how do we do it? Those kinds of things. And when we can inspire that kind of creativity in each other, then more possibility, more plausibility, and then that's how we do this thing called life together in really enthusiastic ways, when we're not taking harming from each other in order to progress a pointed idea. So when we can stay in the design, right? What is in the design? We have so much room, so much more room than staying in the pattern.
From my head as a storyteller, I'm hearing pattern as a noun, which is kind of a set known thing, and design even more as an active word, as a verb, something that is constantly being done and questioned and curious about, and so that's how you're seeing that difference. Is that accurate?
That is how I see it. Yeah, it's very much similar to, when people used to make quilts. And I hope people are still making them because they're lovely. But when people used to make quilts, and I would see quilts that people had done that had the squares and everything was square, and they're so beautiful, and they're displayed, and they're gorgeous. And then I would see the quilts where just odd pieces of things had been sewn together. And to me, that would draw me in so much more. And I would get curious about what's this thing, and why is this an odd angle, and how did that get in there? And so the pattern that we follow, to me, is more regimented and more clean. And so some people feel much better and more connected to the pattern, and that's beautiful. There's neither pattern nor the more non-traditional design are right or wrong. It's really just where people feel compelled to feel and know their safety. When we have a foundation of safety, we can create and show up in so many ways that are more beneficial than I'm scared to not follow the pattern. If I love the pattern and I feel safe and I'm going for the pattern, yes. If I just do the pattern because I just want to make sure I don't mess up, that's where we run into areas of growth and places to get curious.
Beautiful. So we've spent a good 50 minutes really honing in on essentially the superpowers of this Weaver type and this designer type, and all the gifts that it brings the world, unique ways of looking at the world. But just like anything, we've been talking about dichotomies. There's also places of challenge for this type, and we want to honor those just as much, because those could be places to do our own inner work. It'd be places to be like, ooh, I do need to find some support with that, whether it's my community or it's a different way of thinking. And that's where, the diversity really makes things super juicy. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what challenges either you have or you feel like any of these thoughts we've been talking about, if taken to an extreme, the challenges that can come up. One that I know I've always struggled with the Weaver type is that in some ways it can almost become a bit of a cool kids club, where it seems these thoughts we've been talking about seem so self-evident that if you don't also see them, you're not part of the cool kids club. And so I'm curious, with all these amazing things we've been talking about, where do you see is the challenge in this way of thinking?
I think the challenge is, I've always felt like the weirdo, not like the cool kid at all. I've always felt like, the outsider, the outlier, and somebody who had, strange ideas, and ideas that didn't fit the norm, where in a world where the norm is so appreciated, and where we're taught to stay small, to stay under the radar, to stay quiet. You're a good kid if you're not making a lot of noise. I've had the challenge of, I'm so weird. Am I ever going to find other people who are, who even can tolerate me? So far from the cool kids club, I think we're the weirdos, the rebels, the people who rub up against what people want us to do so they feel safe. And I mean, I'm guessing that most of us have tried that. We have tried to look normal, and I think where, when you talk about neurodivergence and all of the words that we now have to describe what so many people have been going through all their lives. I'm glad that we have the semantics for it now. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, how do we fit in? How do we belong? And I think that's one of the reasons that belonging is so important to me, is that belonging is challenged by the ability to show up in a way that other people expect, so that they feel safe and comfortable and attuned to you or to themselves through the reflection of you. And so when people don't get that, then you get bullied, you get ostracized, you feel like you don't belong in a world that challenges itself very little to grow and to connect and to be benevolent and kind. I think we're seeing it more, and I'm heartened by the inclusion. But I think that inclusion um, doesn't fully allow us to envelop the connection that is simple, that is simple, that is breathing together, that is humanizing. We want to still put labels on things in an inclusive container. And what I've found in working in that arena is that it's really hard work, for one. And for another, I've gotten the most traction when I can help people just be real together. And it's almost too simple for our human monkey brains to encompass, but it's 10,000-year-old yogic technology brought into modern day, which is in our presence what is possible in love, in kindness, in connection. How can we do this better together? And one of the tools that I offer people immediately when we start working together, whether corporate or couples and families, is simply holding your arms open, your heart is exposed, your palms are open and facing up, um, and just asking that question: how can we do this better together? I really care about you, about us. How can we do this better together?
And in that question of how can we do this better together, I wonder what the role of reciprocity has within that for you. Within this place of how do we be here now, what does reciprocity look like? And the reason I ask that is because I think with nature in particular, it's a key component of it, because we're so used to extracting when it comes to nature. And we do it with each other as humans as well. There's no doubt about that. But I think in particular, I mean, we don't even call a tree necessarily. We call it a resource, or we call it a material, and not a living being, or even necessarily what specific type of tree it is, like an oak or a maple, that would put us in a closer relationship with it. So I'm curious, in that space that you hold open, what does reciprocity look like?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So reciprocity to me is mutual understanding, and fair is not always equal. So both those things are true to me at the same time. That, do we understand? Do we have a mutual understanding? Can we agree on this point and this point, or this facet and this facet, even if we can't agree on the whole disco ball? So what elements of what's happening here are you lit up by? Are you struck by? Are important to you? What are you hearing me say? What am I hearing you say? This is reciprocity to me. Are we having a mutually beneficial connection, not just conversation, but connection? I think one of the most valuable things, like Steve Sims, and some of my other teaching coaches who've taught me how to be on stages, have said, Tom McCarthy, I think, was the other one, that this is not you speaking. This is you helping to collaborate. And when we can come in reciprocity to collaborating in communication. Rumi's attributed with this, and we know that not everything attributed to Rumi is Rumi, but the attribution is there are a million ways to say I love you, words are but one. And so in this reciprocity is an energetic, an elemental, a time and space, motivation and cognition, intellect, and holding space. That if it's not reciprocal, we can ask when we have the tools, hey, I have a story that this is happening. Is that true? Is that what's happening for you? And inviting the other person, honestly requiring the other person to participate and collaborate in a reciprocal condition of connection.
Well, in that zone of reciprocity, I always end my podcast episodes with the same question, which flips the script just a little bit and asks you, what's something you wish I would have asked? What's something that I missed? What's something either about the topic we've been on or something personal to you that you wish we would have had some time to explore? And now in this moment, we get to.
I love that so much. One of the things that I love discussing with you and that will never get old is how you show up on the planet, Amber, impact people around you. What's your perception of your impact on planet and people in your I'm going to call it sphere of influence, but it really is within the ripples that you make.
Wow. Yeah. That's such a big question. Impact. I would say for me, it's changed a little bit, in the last 4 years in particular, as due to the goals that I had, I really became much more aware of audience, which is interesting to say because I'm trained classically in theater. And by definition, theater doesn't exist unless you have an audience. Like, you can practice all day long, you can get up on stage, you can create all the fancy sets and costumes, but unless you actually have an audience in the seats, you technically do not have theater. But I think in the last 4 years, I've really looked at that question a lot deeper, around what does it mean to consider how it is that somebody else sees the world in order to meet them there. And not in a traumatized way, because I do have a traumatic upbringing that I know hyper alerted me to that, in a way where I was, like you said, seeking my safety, and thus I was reading people's reactions to keep myself safe and not get hurt in physical, emotional, verbal ways. But just in a way that is truly about, if what I'm trying to get across is important enough to spend this energy to do this, why wouldn't I craft it in a way that I feel like you will best be able to hear and or receive, so that we can get in a place of alignment. In particular, in this realm of climate communications, the harsh reality we have to look at is that what we've been trying for 50 years hasn't worked. It's been very informative. It's been very scientific. And in that vacuum, organizations and industries that have perhaps nefarious goals have inserted themselves into that vacuum and planted the seeds of stories that may or may not be true, to actually take us away from empowering us and providing solutions. I think in this moment, It's finding that balance between impact. Impact is such a powerful word. People talk about, in documentaries, we have impact campaigns. For businesses, we have impact that we want to make. There's also the negative things of impact that we have. There's also like physical impact. And what does that mean for conflict? And so there's so many ranges of that word. And I think in this moment, I'm just feeling really aware of all of that range and finding the places within that need a little bit of tending.
There can be a huge impact when we invite and allow ourselves simply to rub our hands together like you had us do at the beginning of the podcast, or offer ourselves the amount of time that it takes to take a couple of longer, slower, deeper breaths. And how does that impact how we move forward from this moment, from that moment when we're done taking the 2 breaths or rubbing our hands together and noticing our full presence, or most of our full presence? How does that impact how we move forward with ourselves, within ourselves, and with each other? And it can have a huge, even life, day, moment changing impact when we become the weaver, when we become for a moment someone who's curious about what can happen if we allow ourselves to be fully present here in a way that can contribute to our happiness and to each other's happiness, to our safety, to each other's safety. And when you're talking about, your presence and how you've evolved in the world to do what you do, every time I talk with you, every time I presence you, think about you, email with you, I am reminded that I have choices in how I show up in the world. And I'm really grateful to you for that, because you role model that, you demonstrate that all the time.
Thank you. That feels like such an honor to be gifted that reflection, especially for, somebody that we've just spent an hour talking about the plethora of choices and how you hold people through that. And so it feels like such a beautiful honor to be able to contribute to that and be in reciprocal relationship in that way with one another. And so thank you for that gift of that question and that reflection.
Thank you, Amber.
Hey, Earthmate. How did that episode resonate? Did it stretch you, inspire you, or perhaps irk you? I'm here for it, so please reach out. Besides the socials, we have a community to practice with on our website, eartharchetypes.com, where more Earth archetypes can guide your path and become dear friends. A great place to start is the quiz to discover your type. Oh, and on your way, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button. See you again soon.